Welcome in to Greenville Grit. This is Greenville Residents in Touch with your hosts, Terry Williams and Michael Overton. This is the show that keeps you connected and in touch with the issues that affect what's happening in your community. Greenville Grit is sponsored by Greenville Toyota, the Overton Group. And now, here are your hosts for Greenville Grit, Terry Williams and Michael Overton.
Good evening and welcome to the Greenville Grit. I'm Terry Williams.
And I'm Michael Overton. Terry, we got a wonderful special guest on tonight.
We sure do.
Representative Brian Brown. Brian, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
A lot of good things to talk about.
That's
so
right.
often we get caught up in the negative things, but you guys have been very busy at work over the last several weeks and some, I think, very positive things for our community.
Yeah,
That's
very
right.
positive things. Statewide, very positive things.
Well, we're excited to get into the meat of that conversation, but first, talking about meat, we need to thank our sponsors, Ribeyes.
Michael, you just
anyway,
had to do
Ribeyes.
that.
We'll keep going, Terry. I almost had to
That's
tell
all
Michael to
right.
stop the tape, but we got to thank Ribeyes, and we've done a special the last
Yes,
several
we have.
weeks where they've given big discounts. One of the things he wanted me to say on the show, there's some people went in to get a discount and did not get the discount. Some confusion there. And if that happened to you, they want you to go back in, talk to Mikey. He's the main chef and one of the proprietors
fix
there,
that
and he'll fix
problem.
it. But the new incentive for Ribeyes as being a sponsor and a watcher of the Greenville Grit, you go in there and mention you get a free shrimp skewer with the purchase of any entree.
That's awesome.
So again, be sure to sponsor them. We've also got the Overton Group, Real Estate and Property Management Professionals, with an office here and in New Bern. We do commercial sales and leasing, business brokerage, residential brokerage, full service house. We got to thank Greenville Toyota. If you're looking for a new Toyota or Scion or a new used car, need your car serviced, go see Craig Gillis and the
That's
Greenville
right.
Toyota team. And we have a new sponsor that just came on with us. It is
That's
Kid
right.
Construction
Kid
Group.
Construction.
Go to their website at kcgbuildgreen.com. Bill Kidd is the owner of that company. He's a friend of mine and has built some beautiful homes here in Greenville, finishing up one or just finished up one in Ironwood and
Right.
some
Definitely
of the
go
other
to the
Windtree
website.
subdivision. Go check out the website and see the details that he puts into his homes. He is a
beautiful.
green builder. And just brings a different look to what we've seen here in Greenville and just a super guy. So that's kcgbuildgreen.com. And I'm gonna put a little plug in too for myrepexpress.com.
That's
You need
right.
an
I like
event for
that.
catering.
There you go.
Yeah.
Please go look him up, Brian.
That's
I mean, you
right.
guys have done a great job. With
I
the place,
appreciate it.
and I
We're
know-
celebrating. We just started our 8th year in business.
That's awesome.
It's been a blessing to come out of the other side of the economic times
Yeah.
and to still be
Exactly.
plugging along here. And, we thank all of our customers. I mean, it's just a special thing to get to go to work every day. And, well, I guess I don't really get to go to work every day, but I know, my wife and
you
everybody
work.
there
That's
go.
right.
You work.
So yeah, it's been great.
Well, I
Thank you.
use Rep Express to cater our events in my real estate business, and it's very good, and you're on top of it, and people come because they know we're serving your food, so
Great.
appreciate
Well, we
it.
appreciate the business.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to take a quick 2-minute commercial break, come right back, get into the conversation with Brian of all the things going on in Greenville. Welcome back to the Greenville Grit. Here, Michael Overton with my co-host Terry Williams, and the constant companion weekly for 6 months now?
It's been a while. It's
So
going
we
good.
had a really good time doing
Yeah,
the
we
show
have.
with you, Terry. Brian Brown, I think this is second or third
Second
time.
Yeah.
Second time.
It's been a while, so I'm
Yeah,
glad to be
it
But
back.
thank you for coming back on with us. That's right, we did the talk of the town, and he popped on.
That's
So
right.
we did
yeah.
that. But you've had y'all have busy schedule over the last. How many weeks were you in Raleigh in a row?
Oh, gosh, I don't even know. The short session started about May 9th, I guess, is
Oh,
when the
wow.
short session started. And we've been, kind of working through those things. The House did a little bit of a, you don't want to call it a recess, but we just did kind of skeleton sessions for a lot of July. Certainly didn't mean we weren't there working.
Right.
Particularly those of us who represent Pitt County as we were trying to navigate some of the waters over in the Senate side and push some of the things we needed to with ECU, Invited Medical Center and things. So it's been a busy short session, not for the faint of heart. Definitely glad to be back in Greenville for at least a couple weeks and
Right.
spend some time with the family and get out in the district and just talk to some folks and kind of get the feel for what they think we've done this last
Well,
short session.
and the show itself is definitely about things that are affecting Greenville. One thing that just bugs me, and I appreciate everything that you've done for the area, but is there a disconnect between the Senate, the House, and the governor's mansion? I mean, the 100 and some years, the Republican Party to get control. And I'm not a Republican. I tell everybody that, but don't get excited. I'm not a Democrat either. But Where are we at on that? Because that's not good for the state. It's like, it's almost like a Washington, D.C. divide at times.
Well, it depends on how you look at it. We had this conversation with Henry the other morning. I think that it's a good thing because it's Republicans being Republicans. It's Republicans who are independent thinkers. It's Republicans who don't just go with the status quo.
Right.
We don't walk in lockstep because we have to, just because there's an R beside our name. It's saying, what are we going to do that's best for the state? What are we going to do that's best for our districts? And then we're going to go to battle for it. And we really don't care because you're a Republican that you have to agree with me. We're going to go to work and we're going to get what's done for the state. I said it before and I'll say it again. It looks like a battered and bruising, but I call it measured approach to policymaking, and North Carolina will be better off for it. Now, you have the media that puts their biased spin on what is going on and what takes place behind closed doors. They don't know. And that's part of it. And we have to understand that, and we have to do a better job at messaging the fact that we're not as far apart as people might think. And I think one of the good things that we did was we opened up the budget discussions between the House and the Senate to the public. That's never been done before.
Right, exactly.
I don't care if it's Democrat control or even former Republican control. We never opened up those meetings to have the public come in, be a part of it, listen to it, and understand what's going on, and those closed-door negotiations not be closed doors. So I think it's a pretty amazing thing that we actually did.
Well, I think what's so cool is you guys, and yes, it took a long time, a lot of ringing, and a lot of discussion to get a balanced budget, to get something and some pretty impressive things done in the budget.
That's right.
Whereas our own city couldn't find $500,000 and we had to do 3 tax increases.
I think
in
that's
5
what's
weeks.
important is, and you can tell from everything that's been accomplished so far before you all took this recess that you all have been working really hard to get it done. And you have obviously agreed on some things because
absolutely.
we have some very positive things that are taking place. Still have some things you want to do and need to accomplish, but of course, the teacher race is important to me. My daughter's a teacher, and it's important to me because of that, but just because of our whole economics of our whole community and the whole state, and what needs to take place
important
with
to
our
the state. I mean,
with
it is our future.
That's
and,
right.
And we've heard educators loud and clear, and we've heard parents loud and clear that we need to continue to support their efforts, and I think we've really done that in this budget. I mean, the largest teacher pay increase in the history of North Carolina. I mean, you cannot not see that and be very proud of what we've done, and be very, very proud of the state of North Carolina and what we can hopefully do in not only keeping good teachers in the system, but attracting new teachers as well to come in and be a part of what we're trying to change here in North Carolina.
Well, if you listen to the media and the North Carolina Association of Educators, it's a horrible, horrible thing that you guys have done up there. But Terry, I'm going to ask you this.
Yeah.
Your daughter is a teacher.
Right.
I want to hear a teacher's perspective on what they've seen.
My daughter teaches 3rd grade, and she's thrilled about the raise, about being able to keep her teacher assistant. She hopes that that's going to happen. Speak to us a little bit about how this affects teacher assistants, because there was so much discussion about if they go along with the teacher raises that there wouldn't maybe be no more teacher assistants in certain grades, maybe just kindergarten, maybe just 1st grade. I know with her, I mean, 3rd grade teachers, especially with all of the extras that have been put on them, need an assistant with all the extra testing and assessing, and I don't know how that's going to change coming up. You might talk about that a little bit and talk about also the change in Common Core and how is that going to affect the start of school.
Sure. Well, in terms of the teacher assistants and the raise and those sort of things, when you look at what was taking place, and this was part of the holdup with getting a budget compromise accomplished, the House's position since the very beginning was we are not going to support anything that has a reduction in teacher assistants. It just doesn't seem like the right thing to do. And we talked about that 3rd grade when we passed down things like Read to Achieve and everything that has to be accomplished within that 3rd grade spectrum. It doesn't make really good sense to say we're going to cut 3rd grade teaching assistants and when you have those additional classroom duties. The Senate's perspective since the beginning was that they wanted to kind of relinquish all of those teacher assistant positions. And what a great compromise that every teacher assistant is able to keep their job and actually even was able to get a raise as well. But I also think it's important that we were able to give flexibility to the local LEAs to be able to decide what they want to do with those dollars. Do they want to put it in classroom teachers? Do they want to put it in teacher assistants? And if they do put it in classroom teachers, let's also make sure sure they have the flexibility to revert that money and put it back into teaching assistants
When they
if,
need
if
it.
they so need to do so.
If they need it.
Providing that local flexibility piece is such a key component to what we're trying to accomplish from our public school systems.
Look, and some of these teacher assistants, even though my daughter has one, she doesn't have her all day.
That's right.
She has to share her with one or two other teachers,
That's
depending
right.
on probably the year or how the principal sees fit to do it.
That's
But
right.
but it is just so important. And I heard some study came out that was on either Henry's show or some show saying that they had done a study that here we are back to everybody does studies.
Studies.
Of course, we study everything.
That
Calvin-
teacher
Calvin does
assistant,
not do studies, remember, he does
that
a vote
teacher
opinion.
assistants weren't important and weren't showing that there was a reason to have them in the classroom. But I will guarantee you, I know that you've spent time in a classroom.
Absolutely.
But that was a day. If people could have to spend a week, don't go just for a day, but go for a week and see what a Monday through Friday without a teacher's assistant would really be like and what happens in the classroom. Because I didn't know until I volunteered a little bit in her classroom, but nobody knows really what they have to go through and what you're facing with the children coming in, 22 children from 22 different households, not knowing what you're going to have to face with each of those
right.
children for the day. It's a lot of
Yeah,
responsibility.
and place yourself at the front of that classroom with those 22
That's
eight-year-olds with different and diverse backgrounds, different and diverse learning, ways in which they
That's
engage
right.
in learning. Some are very far ahead, some are right in the middle, some are far behind. So how do you engage that whole classroom,
right.
and how do you do it as an individual? Again, in front of 22 eight-year-olds.
That's right.
That's a difficult proposition to try to hold, and I'd challenge anybody to
Yeah.
go do it. And I think that's what we're trying to address here.
Well, Brian, do you mind talking maybe a little bit about, too, where are we at on the school voucher? I know there was a big lawsuit, but I believe the vouchers have been issued. Give us an update on that. How's it going from what you're hearing, and where are we at on the lawsuit on that?
Well, I get the biggest thing is what a great showing of support from parents wanting to take advantage of the voucher system, the opportunity scholarships, as we call them, and be able to take control of their child's educational futures. And again,
How many were issued?
I don't have those exact numbers, and I wouldn't want to lie on that. I know that there was more than the issuance in terms of applications that came into the system, which is, tremendously positive.
So more than estimated.
More than estimated, yeah. So that's been tremendously positive. But again, I can't. I always have to have this conversation with the re-emphasis on the fact that it's not because we don't support public education, and we don't think that public education is such a great avenue for the majority of children, and will continue to be the right avenue for the majority of children. People choose different schooling systems for different reasons, and it's not always academic. So a lot of it's social. A lot of it has to do with maybe a religious application.
Right.
So there's a lot of different reasons why someone wants to potentially take advantage of the opportunity scholarships and send their child to a different school system. And so I think that it's a very valuable component within our state in its future. But again, I think that as studies have shown us across the state, here we go talking about studies again,
Right.
but across the nation, the majority of your students and parents are still going to choose that public school option. So we need to ensure that those public schools are as strong as they possibly can be, with the best teachers in the classroom and the most resources that they can possibly have, while also allowing parents to have choice to send their kids where they feel the best situation is.
Obviously, the biggest argument is it taking money away from public schools? And that's what most people say. We're not going to be able to get what we need in the public schools if you give vouchers, for people to choose a different avenue. So as long as, I guess, it will
which
be
is just a falsehood.
accepted.
As our opportunity scholarships are actually rolled out, it's a falsehood. When you look at the per pupil expenditures for a public school student in the state of North Carolina, and what the actual vouchers are rolled out as is what they would receive as a full voucher claim. There is a variance in there that's returned to the state of North Carolina, about $19 million. And, that's not my numbers. That's not Republican
Right.
numbers. Those aren't partisan numbers. Those are nonpartisan North Carolina General Assembly fiscal research numbers as they look in. And quite frankly, I think they're extremely conservative. So I think it'll actually be more dollars
Right.
put back into the public school
So
system.
real quick, if we could just go back just a moment to the Common Core question, because it was, originally, if I understood it correctly, North Carolina was going to vote to do away with it completely. Then the governor changed that, and in some way, can you explain
Well,
that?
what we've done is we've opted to relinquish control of Common Core. What we wanted to make sure that it was important that we did is we didn't stop any standards, and we wanted to make sure that everyone was parents. I mean, make sure that everyone felt comfortable that we were still going to hold our kids accountable and we were still going to have strong academic standards as it compared to other states in the nation, and make sure that our kids were as prepared as kids in Massachusetts, for example, as we reformulated what would become the North Carolina state standards. So as we go through this process of reformulating our own state standards and what we feel is important as a state to roll out as academic standards, we wanted to make sure those standards were some sort of standards were still kept in place to keep us competitive.
So, why though? Why? And just I know a little bit about Common Core. I've read the definition of really what it was, but why the change after it was just put in a few years ago to switch back?
Well, it's not really a switchback. It's more of saying we're gonna drive everything from a state level versus a federal level. That's really, it's more of an ideological conversation. If you want me to be very honest with you, and my conservative counterparts on the right will probably hate me for this, but I really believe that what you're going to end up seeing that comes out of North Carolina for North Carolina state standards will be very much like Common Core. The question is not so much between the standards and it's the curriculum that was being driven from Common Core, and I think that's really what gave parents a lot of heartburn, because there is a difference between curriculum and standards, and we really left that curriculum development with no plan, no resources, really nothing to really help our teachers out in the classrooms to prepare for what those standards were going to uphold. We left them out there on their own developing curriculum. And when we did that, there was some questionable curriculum, not only in North Carolina, but across the nation. And I think that's really what drove a lot of parents to say, wait a minute. I don't think this is the right thing for our kids. I don't think this is the right thing for our future. So that was really kind of the driving force behind this.
So what will happen in the fall? What system will teachers be using when school starts?
We
Because
will
it's
keep in
not
place the standards
developed yet.
we will keep in place the standards that are everyone is following at the current time as we continue to develop the North Carolina state standards.
So it could possibly go this year with Common Core like it was last year because there's not enough time.
Very much so.
Until maybe the next
This
year
this
change.
actually, as the legislation stands, is a 5-year rollout.
Okay.
We're continuing to talk a little bit about schools. Let's get into ECU, the Brody School of
Absolutely.
Medicine, Vidant. We mentioned on the show, we also mentioned on Talk of the Town when we hosted that about the upper payment limit, the UPL, as well as SOTCO, Set Off Debt Collection Act. And for those that don't know, it was some decisions that were made with an unintended consequence of ECU kind of getting caught in the crossfire that really hurt the school. It hurt Vidant and the ability to rehire and the ability to collect funds that were owed to them. Give us an update. I know that it was somewhat successful. Or could have been completely successful.
I would say it was the most successful situation that we passed. It's interesting. The senior budget writer, Representative Nelson Dollar, said on a conference call as we were rolling out the compromise budget, he said, Representative Brian Brown has gotten more in this budget for a specific district than anyone else in the entire legislature. And I think that's very, very true when you look at where we started at in the last long session with the loss of SOTCO, the loss of UPL. And then when we got a little bit of UPL, there was going to be assessed almost 30% back to the state. Huge losses for East Carolina University. And, it is difficult for a medical school to make money when you don't have a resource like Rex Hospital, for example, as a revenue earning operation.
Well, and I know that, Brian, you had a lot to do with that, and I do think you and Speaker Tillis, too, as well as the governor, I know all were very supportive of it. Where are the other representatives and senators in the eastern part of the state? Because ECU might be based in Greenville, but it's regional.
Absolutely.
And Vidant is regional.
That's
and
right.
it's were they in support of this also? Did we have an eastern regional support of this?
In the House, you always had support. I was banging this drum loud and clear last session. We passed it out last session. Bills that I had actually sponsored and put on the floor, and we passed. We passed 3 bills this session that I sponsored and ran through committee and onto the floor and sent over to the Senate. The House has voted unanimously on every bill that I've put out there in support of East Carolina. They would always stall over in the Senate. Really trying to get folks to understand the unique difference between UNC hospitals, UNC, the School of Medicine at UNC, and East Carolina University's Brody School was a struggle to do, and even for Eastern delegation to understand that Vidant Medical Center is not owned by East Carolina, and that there's a clear distinction there. And
whereas UNC owns their own
Rex
hospital,
right? Which is really where this fight started. It was a dispute between Rex and Wake Med. Public-private, and what they viewed as unfair advantages for a public institution.
Wow.
Well,
was very happy that we were able to resolve it, though.
I'll tell you what, Terry, it might be really good taking our second commercial break
Great.
and come back in and wrap up the last 5 or 6 minutes of the show and talk about autism as a big thing, as well as some of the other pending legislation maybe coming down the pipe. So we'll be back in 2 minutes with Brian Brown.
Welcome back to The Grit. We've had an excellent conversation with all the great accomplishments that have been taking place this past session here with Brian Brown. We appreciate you being here and
Right. Thankful to
answering
be
us
here.
very candidly and informing the citizens exactly what's going on. It's been really, really important. One thing that I did hear this morning on Talk of the Town that I'd really like to ask you about is about I'm not even sure what the complete real title is, but the unemployment debt reduction.
That's right.
And what has taken place, how we had the debt to begin with, and what has taken place, and how it's been reduced.
Right.
So-
Well, when we came in this term back in January of last year, 2013, it was the first item of business that we actually took up. Even prior to me winning an election in November, I was in Raleigh trying to kind of get my head around what was taking place because it was North Carolina's own fiscal cliff,
Right.
and so it was actually the first piece of legislation we passed in the last long session.
I remember that.
Yeah.
And what a wonderful piece of legislation. Essentially, we owed $2.5 billion worth of debt to the federal government that was just hanging over our heads, and not just hanging over the state's heads, but really compressing down on our small businesses and businesses of all
Exactly.
size, really, forcing them to pay higher percentage rates back for unemployment to cover this debt. And if we didn't start paying this back, not only start paying it back, but pay it down quickly,
Right.
those rates would have went up even higher, and our businesses in our state would have been even more gravely affected. So when you're talking about a state that had high unemployment to begin with, 5th highest in the country,
Right.
and we have $2.5 billion worth of unemployment, and you're starting to compress down on businesses, well, what's happening? Those businesses
Because
are
the
still...
businesses ultimately
That's right.
had to cover that.
That's right,
Right.
because and that's something that is probably a significant point to point out. Employees never pay a penny of unemployment
Nope, they
insurance.
sure don't.
That's right.
Employers pay unemployment insurance, not employees. So again, as you're talking about these higher percentage rates being paid to the federal government and to the state to cover this debt, you're still compressing down on job opportunities, and businesses are
That's
saying
right.
we're going to hire, and helping us to try to recover from our unemployment situation. And through folks like Del Falwell, the Assistant Secretary of Commerce, we've really worked very hard at the direction of this legislation that we passed last January to reduce this debt. And in about a year and a half now, we've reduced it to a little over $800,000,
Huge
which is
amount of
So that's
incredible.
reduction.
from
It's incredible.
$2.5 billion
$2.5 billion.
to 800,000.
Yeah, if our federal government
Which-
can only work that way, right?
Exactly. Which
Yeah, that's not
we-
going to happen, man. We'll keep talking
Yeah,
about this
well,
stuff
that's a
here.
whole nother
But what a
show.
significant piece, and
It is.
and to really think about it, when we look at attracting new businesses, if you're a new business and you're looking at North Carolina, you're looking at Virginia, you're looking at Louisiana, Georgia, and you start to look at the total package of what you're moving into,
Right.
do you want to move into a North Carolina that's going to be forced to pay higher unemployment rates, or are you going to look at a Virginia, for instance, that doesn't?
right.
Okay, it makes us more attractive for businesses to
does.
want to look and relocate to North Carolina. And
Well-
you encompass the tax reform package that we put in place, and the list goes on and on and on. That's making North Carolina now ranked the fifth ranked business state in the country. What a wonderful place
Where are
to
we
be.
at then in regulatory reform? Because that also affects
Exactly.
businesses.
It absolutely does.
In so many ways. And there, of course, the papers have already issued articles that you guys are destroying the environment by repealing all of these rules, which probably, in reality, could have been some of the strongest and most strict rules in the nation.
Sure.
Where are we at in that?
We continue. We've passed some really strong regulatory reform acts coming out of the last session, really cutting that red tape and getting out of the way of small businesses so they can grow and prosper and hire and feel comfortable in what they're doing. There's still a good bit of regulatory reform that's held up right now that we need to go back to Raleigh and get passed. And we'll have some negative impacts on small business if we don't get this regulatory
Exactly.
reform packages passed. Regulatory reform is a very interesting dynamic because you move of one component, and it may slide and hurt another component of your for environment, for example. So taking a small, measured approach to these things are very important, but it's the right thing to do for North Carolina and the right thing for businesses to be able to grow. And we've also taken into an approach of that we're going to relook at every single one of these regulations, so that we're not just sitting out there with archaic regulations on the books like we have for years and years and years, just layering all these regulations on top of each other, but we're actually going back and looking at them in detail, rolling back the ones that don't make sense anymore and tweaking the ones to make them fit the needs of the citizens and the businesses more appropriately as time goes on.
Well, Terry, we got about a minute and a half left.
So you're on a break right now. You're getting ready to go back in session
in
a little bit. So tell us what will be up for you all to look at and possibly vote on when you get back.
Well, when we go back, we're going to look at coal ash. We still need to come to a resolution on coal ash and protect the citizens and our important resources with coal ash. We need to finish the regulatory reform bill and things. And then we'll come back in after the election in November. We'll do a mid-November session that will address Medicaid reform.
Okay.
And I think that it's important for us to go back and do that and really look at what we can do. It become, a little more predictability to the state budget in terms of Medicaid.
Well, Terry, we got to thank Brian again. Thank you
really
for coming back
I appreciate
on and being
you
a
having
part
me.
of the show.
It's always a lot of fun.
And also got to thank our sponsors one more time. The Overton Group, Kidd Construction Group, KCGBuildGreen.com, Rep Express. As always, what you guys do for the community.
Thank you.
Really appreciate y'all. And
Rib
Greenville
Eyes.
Toyota and Ribeyes, free shrimp skewer with purchase of any entree. Join us next, this Wednesday night, obviously at 6:30, but also Friday night at 6:30, Saturday morning at 9 on Cable 7. And until then, we will see you next Wednesday.